Yeah, I don't know where to start. I guess I'll talk about where I grew up. My, the res I grew up on. So yeah, the res I grew up on was called Constance Lake First Nations, but they call it Colstock. But yeah, when I grew up there, um, I'm not sure if there was sewers because I remember nobody had toilets. They all had buckets, and I remember our house was just plywood floors. But yeah, and well, yeah, we never had. I'm not sure if we had running water when I was younger, but yeah, I remember we all had buckets. And in the back of everybody's house, there was a big square pit that was like 7 feet tall, and that's where you dumped your bucket. Well, yeah, that's how it was growing up on the res. And my father, he was my biological father. His name is Bert Sutherland, but he also goes by um, Shawnagijik, and that means Southern Sky or Southern Heaven. But yeah, he was a dog sledder a long time ago when he was younger. He used to dog sled medicine, penicillin from Timmins, Ontario, Canada, all the way up north to Fort Albany, Moosonee. That's what he used to do back in the day. So he really grew up in the woods his whole life. So yeah, so my father growing up, he knew like the name of every tree, every plant. You know, like nowadays, how like all the kids know the name of all the rappers, all the singers, all the TV shows. You know, that's how my dad was. He knew everything because that was a cultural norm for him growing up. So yeah, so I learned a lot from my father and also my mom too. I learned a lot from my mother. My mother grew up in the Hudson Bay area. She was in a boarding school, and then her grandpa came and took her out. So she was raised by her grandpa and grandma out in the woods. So yeah, I had a really traditional upbringing. So growing up there on the res in Constance Lake First Nation, we did a lot of hunting. We did a lot of trapping. And I remember in the wintertime, it was tough because we would use snowmobiles to travel out to the trap lines. And then I remember there were times I would sit behind my father and it would be so cold. I was holding on the back of him. And he never knew how cold I was. But yeah, I thought I was going to freeze to death at sometimes. And by the time we checked all the trap lines, we had a big toboggan in the back. And there'd be a bunch of animals in the back there. So I would squeeze my way inside all the bodies to try to get warm. So yeah, so when we go back home, I'd be like trying to squeeze in the side of the toboggan in the back so I could stay warm. So that cold air wouldn't hit me. But yeah, I remember too, my snowsuit would be bloody sometimes. And I go to school with a bloody snowsuit. And I heard the school teachers looking at me with my bloody snowsuit, wondering where it come from. But yeah, I really loved how I grew up in Colstock, Constance Lake First Nations. Yeah, when I was growing up, I went to a day school, and then my dad, he used to take me to school in a snowmobile. So that's how he would take me to school. Take me to school, bring me home on the toboggan on the snowmobile. Yeah, life was fun. So yeah, we always did a lot of hunting, a lot of trapping. In the summer times, we'd always go hunting. We always go hunting bears, hunting moose. And I always used to, and my dad was a carpenter. He was always making cradle boards, always making toboggans. Next to our house, he built a big garage by himself. And I think he harvested most of the wood by himself, except the plywood. The plywood he bought. But most of the wood he harvested himself. So yeah, life was a lot of hard work. I remember too, we had to get water from the lake and carry it home. But back then the water was fresh. But nowadays they got a logging company there, and now the logging company polluted the water. Now the water is polluted. They have a boil advisory. I remember one of my cousins, their baby, they were giving their baby a bath, and the baby's skin got all burnt because that's how polluted the water is now on my reservation. So yeah, the logging company really polluted the water. So yeah, it is kind of bad up in Canada for natives, and that's one thing you don't hear about. Like when you hear about Canada, you hear about like how it's so safe, like people don't leave their doors locked, you know. But that's all you hear is about the Caucasian people. You just hear about their life, their culture. You hear nothing about the native people, what's going on with them. So yeah, there's a lot of extreme racism. There's a lot of native people are really oppressed up there. It is really bad. So so yeah, I grew up on the res for a while. Then when I was about 7 or 8, that's when my mom left Constance Lake. She took me and she took my little brother Abraham, and we lived out in Maniwaki, Quebec. And then when we were living in Maniwaki, Quebec, because we never grew up that life, she didn't really know what to do. So she went up to there's a wildlife preserve called Kabunga. So out there is where she built a log house. So she built a log house. My older brothers, they came and helped her. And so in the summer times, that's where we would stay. And in the fall time, we would come back into the town, and then my mom would rent a house. But as soon as spring came around, we would go back up there and live out in the woods. And to me, living out in the woods was a lot of fun because I mean, growing up, I kind of kind of hated how I grew up, like traditional, and at the same time, I kind of loved it. The reason why I didn't like it is because like growing up, we had like handmade gloves. My mom would make handmade hats. And then after, I remember all the other kids had these nice fancy gloves, nice fancy coats, and I just wanted to be like the other kids, you know. So I was always embarrassed. And then, but yeah, on the res in Callstock, there was a church, and I remember a lot of the natives were going to the church, and my family was really traditional. And then a lot of the natives on my reservation would always make fun of my family. I remember one time there was a tornado came by, and then my daddy went outside and put down tobacco to not let that tornado bother our house. And then when the tornado was gone, I remember a lot of people were making fun of my family because that's what my dad did, because everybody went to church. Yeah, even my own relatives, they were all making fun of my father because of what he did. So that's how it was on the res, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of hated how I grew up. Like I didn't like that. I wish I could have. Like growing up when I was a kid, one of the things I wanted when I was older is one of the goals I wanted to be. I actually wanted to be a white man. I mean, I thought that was an actual thing you could actually become when I was a kid. So yeah, that's what I wanted to be when I was younger. It's because of all the hatred we got from from other people on the reservation, and I think that's the reason why my mom left to Maniwaki. And but yeah, growing up in Maniwaki was a lot of fun too. And but at the same time too, we faced a lot of that of like oppression from other natives over there too. Because I remember when I was in the schools, and my mom would talk to me in Korean. I remember the other kids would mimic my mom, like when she would talk to me in Korean. I mean, my mom was proud of it, so she would talk to me in Korean in front of everybody. But I remember the other kids would mimic her, and I remember I just act like I couldn't understand. I didn't know what she was talking about. And I remember too, we had an Algonquin class in that school in Quebec. And I remember in that class, I used to act like I didn't know anything, just to no, just so I can be like everybody else. So yeah, growing up, I never did like growing up how my mom raised us. But at the same time, I really liked it because when we once we left the town, I knew I wouldn't face none of that oppression, you know, from the native people and non-native people. But then at the same time, when we were in the woods, I wanted everything else. Like I wanted TV, I wanted cartoons, I wanted McDonald's, I wanted milkshakes. But I remember out there, like we had salt, sugar, ketchup, but it would only last so long. And after it was gone, you had just really bland food, you know. Like we would get a moose, and then one of the ways they would cook it was boil it in water, and it would be really tough. So yeah, just no flavor in the moose meat. But yeah, one of my favorite ways of eating was by when they would roast it. So we either had roast duck or roast beaver. That was always one of my favorite, eating roast duck and roast beaver. But yeah, growing up in the woods, I really loved hunting. So that's one of the things too about growing up in the woods. When the like especially an elder, when they would go hunting, one of the things they would do, they would take their grandkids, is because one of the things they go hunting for is partridge, and partridge are really super camouflage, and they need those younger kids to spot them out because those older people wouldn't be able to see them. So yeah, so when I was younger, I would be taking on a lot of hunting trips because they would use my eyes to spot the animals. So I was their spotter. We'd be walking along, I'd be like, over there, you know. And my mom would grab her gun and just shoot. So yeah, so when we were hunting, I was the eyes, and my mom was the shooter. So yeah, we did a lot of hunting, but we also set our nets. And setting our nets, we got a lot of food. When we would set our nets, we would get a lot of fish, and then all that fish, in order for it to not rot, we would turn it to powdered meat. And then when you turn it to powdered meat, the meat's not going to rot. It's going to stay fresh for a long time. And then when you have that powdered meat too, you can use that powdered meat in your soup for flavoring in your broth. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty healthy for you too. But yeah, one thing I noticed growing up is I'm not sure. I'm sure some of you may have seen this, but you ever see like elders grow up and they put like a big chunk of lard or a big chunk of fat in their food? But yeah, that's what I saw a lot. I remember sometimes we would get comods, and one of the things we got with this big massive metal tub of lard. And then when we would get that, the elders would take a big scoop of it and put on their food, and just take this big mouthful of just lard with their food. And I always wondered why they would like that. And until I got older and I went to school, I took a health class, and then I learned about ketosis. So yeah, so one thing I learned was back in the day, all of the elders were in a natural state of ketosis from eating all of the wild foods. So when you're in a natural state of ketosis, you live off your body fats and your oils, and that's what you crave. But because of the introduction of sugars and flours, it caused a lot of Native people to become diabetic, and it's really devastating on Native people. So back then, this is the reason why Natives really loved that big scoop of lard in their food, because they were in a natural state of ketosis from all the wild foods they would eat. So yeah, and when I was a kid, I actually liked it for a while, but it kind of ruined my diet when we go back to the towns, because I got too spoiled on McDonald's and restaurant foods. But yeah, but now that I'm older, I kind of understand why the Native people did that, you know. And nowadays I don't have any hard feelings for what they did, because I learned what happened to Native people, all of the boarding schools, what the U.S. government, Canadian government, and the churches did to Native people. So now I no longer have any hard feelings, and nowadays I'm trying to fight that embarrassment of speaking Ojibwe or trying to teach it. Because yeah, like growing up, I never wanted anybody to know that my parents were fluent speakers or that I understood Ojibwe. But it wasn't until I was working at Gregson Hinckley, there was this one lady, I think her name was Marge Anderson, but she was a fluent speaker. And then one time she was talking Ojibwe to another person, and then I understood her, and I answered back, and then she heard me answer back, and she was all shocked. And so she would every once in a while she would test me how much I knew. Like she would ask me phrases, and some of the times too it was dirty jokes, and nobody understood. But yeah, if you ever work with a group of elders, like if they get comfortable with you, they're going to start telling dirty jokes. I don't know why that is with elders, but they always tell dirty jokes. But yeah, it was because of her. Like she was one of the first people who told me to I should teach Ojibwe and don't be ashamed of it. Like go to school and learn everything, learn all the grammatical rules. Like, like learn how to read, learn how to write it, and someday learn to teach it. So she was kind of the first one who kind of opened me up to that idea. And then slowly over time, my mom would tell me to do the same thing. Go to college, learn Ojibwe, learn to teach it. So finally, I went to Fond du Lac College, and that's where I first learned Ojibwe. So yeah, so when I took that Ojibwe class, it was actually kind of hard to actually get inside there and learn Ojibwe because when I was a kid growing up, my parents spoke to me in Ojibwe, they spoke to me in Cree, and there was also a mix called Ojibwe. And I remember understanding every single word and being able to talk back. But it wasn't until I was a teenager when I realized that I really couldn't like respond back with anything like on speaking, but I understood a lot of what they said. So it's when I was a teenager when I realized like, man, I don't even know how to speak Ojibwe no more, So when I was in college, I remember there was other people in there. They thought I was a fluent speaker because my parents were fluent speakers. So at the same time, it was it took a lot for me to sign up for the class and to sit inside there because the other Native people would look at me, ask me like, how come I'm in there? Like, aren't you already a fluent speaker? So it actually took a lot for me to admit that, hey, like to tell everybody I don't know how to speak Ojibwe. That's why I'm here to learn Ojibwe. So yeah, so growing up in Canada, it was like the opposite. Like nobody wanted to be Native. People would tease me. And then when I come here to the United States, it was the exact opposite. Everybody wanted to be Native again. Everybody wanted to learn our language. So yeah, so it was a big change coming here to the U.S. So yeah, so my first teacher, her name was Tara Dupuy. She was my first Ojibwe language teacher at Fond du Lac College. Because the original teacher, Dan Jones, he was on a 1-year sabbatical, and so she was my teacher for 1 year, and then Dan Jones came back, and he was my teacher for I was only there for a year and a half, so he was my teacher for the second half, that first semester of the second year. But yeah, he was a really good teacher. It was a lot of fun there, and his class too. He was always joking around. One of the things he always said, he would always joke around in his class. He would say, when you walk out of the door, duck your heads when you leave the classroom. The reason why he said that, because there's a laser beam on the door. If you don't duck your head, that laser beam is going to wipe away your memory and you're going to forget everything. So he says, when you leave the classroom, duck your head and walk out. So that way you can retain everything that you learn in class. The reason why he would say that, because the next day or the next class when homework was due, some people will say, oh, I forgot we had homework, that was their excuse, they forgot. So he would always tell people, make sure you duck your head when you leave the classroom. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, a lot of joking around with him. So it was really nice. He was my first teacher. But yeah, in that class, there was I was one of the top students, and there was another one named Marcus Amismaki or Manalu Maingan. Me and him were in that Ojibwe class together. We were Dan Jones's top students, and me and Marcus were always competing on who knew more. But yeah, it's really nice to have someone to have a rival with, to push you to keep learning. So I'm really glad he was in that class with me. If he wasn't in that class, I never would have pushed myself as hard as I did. But yeah, eventually I went to the University of Minnesota, and I learned Ojibwe from Brendan Fairbanks for another year and a half. And then from Brendan Fairbanks, he's like a really good expert in the Ojibwe language because he's a linguist. And he was able to break down all the grammatical rules, and he really gave us a lot of good notes. Like he shared with us a lot of his research. So from him is when my Ojibwe language skills really took off. And then soon after I was done with the language classes there, this immersion cohort opened up called Ojibwe mo tarida o magida kimnong. That means let's speak Ojibwe together here on our earth. That's what that translates to. Excuse me. So yeah, that immersion cohort was 1 month long of no English and just speaking Ojibwe. So that's where I went to and I went to the very first one. I think it was 2010 or 2011. And then after that, they had immersion weekends throughout the fall, winter, and spring. So I went to those as well, and it was just immersion only on the weekends. And then the next year they had another one, and I went to the next one in the summertime. So I was there for the second immersion cohort in the summertime. And then during the fall, winter, and spring, they had another immersion weekends, and I went to that too. So I had 2 full years of immersion in the summers and immersion in the weekends. So yeah, it's because of Fond du Lac College, University of Minnesota, and Ojibwe Motarda Omagada Kiminong is one of the reasons why I really learned Ojibwe, and why my Ojibwe language skills are as good as they are today. So the dialect I spoke was a lot different growing up than the one that I know now. It was more of a northern dialect. That's the one I spoke growing up. So nowadays I speak more of a Minnesota, Mille Lacs, St. Croix dialect. So that's what I learned now. And but yeah, when I was living in Quebec, my mom had a lifelong friend named Leonard Moose, and then my mom and him started going out. And after my mom and him, he was the one who brought me down here to United States. So yeah, now here I am in the U.S. Yeah, and Leonard Moose, he's a fluent speaker as well, but he passed away in 2018. And, so yeah, so he was St. Croix dialect, and I also learned a lot of him, and I managed to get a lot of recordings, and he taught me a lot, and he taught us a lot of songs. He taught us a lot of different ceremonies. He taught us a lot of legends. He taught us the meaning behind different ceremonies. He taught me how to work with spirits, like how to perceive them, what to do when you see them. But yeah, growing up in the woods in Canada, I grew up around a lot of elders, and but it was really strict. You know, growing up in Canada was really strict. One of the reasons why it was really strict was because those elders were in boarding schools, and they were beaten a lot. And so growing up, I was actually abused a lot too myself. But all that abuse I had growing up, it doesn't affect me. Like, I'm not traumatized by it because it happened to me at an early age. It's like growing up, it was normal. So yeah, I think that's to me, that's the reason why I think it doesn't affect me. Like, I don't have nightmares or anything about it, you know. So, but yeah, but it was really strict growing up. If I wanted to come around and sit with the elders, you know, I had to sit there and I couldn't sleep, because if they talked about something cultural or whatever, they said whatever they were talking about, those spirits would come around, you know, because they would wonder why we're talking about them. And they said if they see me get tired and fall asleep, they said you're going to shorten your life. That's what they would tell me. So they were really strict that I never fall asleep if I wanted to stay awake with them at night. But when they did talk, they would talk for a long time, like almost all night. And by the time you went to bed, you only got a couple of hours of sleep, and then they would be awake right when the sun was rising. So we always had to get up when the sun was rising, and the moment the sun starts setting, we stopped all of our work, and we just sat around and we ate dinner, and we'd sit around and eat and talk until it would get pitch black, and they would just sit around and talk. And I remember it would get so pitch black that the only light you could see is when they would take a hit from their cigarettes. So yeah, one elder would take a hit from his cigarettes, and you see his face glow, you know. Then another elder would take a hit of his cigarette, and you see his face glow. You know, just every once in a while you see someone's face was glow from taking a hit from their cigarette. Until eventually somebody would make a fire, you know, and then they make a fire, and then we'd sit around and talk even more. So yeah, so when the sun set, I either had to go to bed, or if I wanted to sit down with them, I had to stay awake until they were finished talking. So yeah, it was really strict with them, especially when you work with elders. They were kind of mean, kind of bossy. They were always had a short temper. So it was really tough. So like nowadays, when I hear someone talking about, like, they say how they wish they could grow up with elders, and I tell them, I was like, I tell them it's not any kind of fantasy, it's not some kind of fantasy growing up with elders. It's actually really strict. It's a really tough life if you want to be raised by elders. So yeah, growing up was really strict. Growing up was really tough. But yeah, but now I'm thankful for everything I learned from them, and also too, like, a lot of those elders too, they abuse me, but nowadays I'm not mad at them about what they did to me. I forgive them because I know what happened to them. I know what they went through in boarding schools. Like, I mean, what do you think is going to happen when you take a kid and you put him in a boarding school and you get beaten all the time? And then what do you think that person's going to do when they have kids? They're gonna teach that child what they were taught. So growing up, I learned a lot of the language, a lot of the culture, but I also learned I also got a lot of their I don't know what you would call it. I experienced a lot of their suffering, like all that bad stuff they learned as well. They also pass it on to me as well. So nowadays, now that I have kids, that's one thing I got to be careful to do is don't teach that all that traumatizing stuff to my kids. Just teach all that good stuff. And also too, my wife Mary Barbara knows the same thing, because her father too faced a lot of trauma like that as well. He was pretty mean growing up, and so that's one thing we both talk about, all that trauma and everything that happened from the boarding school era. Like all that abuse and stuff, all that hatred keeps handing down from one generation to the next. So one thing me and Mary said to each other, that all that stuff is going to end with me and her. So our kids aren't going to know any of that. The only thing our kids are going to know is the language and the culture. They're not going to know any of that abuse or that hatred that our elders faced when they grew up. So nowadays, that's one thing I always got to keep an eye on myself. Like, just watch my anger, watch my temper. Always try to be happy. So that's one thing I do every morning. I make the next day better than it was yesterday. That's what I try to do every single day. And then one thing I always hear my mom say, always use your tobacco. So yeah, so every once in a while I try to put down tobacco and just talk about my day. Like, I don't try to ask for anything. I just talk about my day. It's almost like writing a journal, I guess. Like how people write in their journals. So yeah, sometimes when I put down tobacco, it's almost like writing your journal. So yeah, so that's one of the things too. Same thing too. If I also have a Pawagin, I got it right here next to me. I got it in my bag. My brother Joe Ogamawa made this. If you want to see, there's polar bears on it. Because my family, we're polar bear clan. So we go by my mother's clan. My mother's from the James Bay area, so she's polar bear clan. So we go with our mom's clan. But yeah, I just wanted to. Somebody asked a question: do I speak Northern dialect? I mean, not really. I mean, I understand it a lot because my mom speaks that dialect, and I understand a lot of my mom says. So yeah, whenever my mom speaks, I understand her. But also too, my mom, she also grew up in Hudson Bay. She grew up in the Constance Lake area. In Quebec, they speak Algonquin. So she grew up all over the place, and she knows a lot of different dialects. And then depending on where my mom goes, I notice I could hear her Ojibwe kind of change a little bit, depending on the people she's around. So yeah, my mom's really adaptive with her Ojibwe language skills. And so yeah, my mom speaks Northern dialect, and I can still understand her. But I myself, I never really try to really learn Northern dialect. But that's one of the things I want to learn next. I want to try to learn the other dialects, not only just Minnesota, Wisconsin dialect, but I want to learn the different dialects in Ontario, Canada. So in Ontario, Canada, they got Cree, Ojibwe, they got Ojibwe, and then up north, they got Swampy Cree and Moose Cree. Moose Cree is an L dialect. The N's are replaced with L's. So yeah, so it's that one is a lot more complicated to pay attention. I mean, to understand the Moose Cree. But yeah, another dialect that's really hard for me to understand is Odawa, because I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and Sault Ste. Marie, Canada for a while, and there's a lot of Odawa speakers over there. And that one or two is really difficult to understand. Let me look in the chat. Okay, there we go. Let me read some of these questions. Oh no, we don't. For me, we usually go by our father's clan, but all of us just decide to go by our mom's clan. But I know some people go by their mother's clan, like Potawatomi people. They go by their mother's clan. But yeah, we just decided to go by our mom's clan. And I'm not sure what my biological father's clan was. So yeah, but yeah, I'll talk more about like ceremonies and cultural things now. So growing up, I actually witnessed a lot of things, a lot of ceremonies, a lot of different cultural things happening. So like I seen a lot of bad things happen with ceremonies, a lot of good things. Like I seen a lot of bad medicine, like people call it nowadays. I witnessed some like really crazy stuff growing up. I knew this one guy, he would do these ceremonies. Like, I mean, I've seen people do fake ceremonies where they charge people money. Like I knew there's one person, he would rip people off by being a shake tent runner, but he would go inside there and shake it by himself, you know, and he would mimic those voices. Or one of the things, he would sit behind a blanket and make it dark, and he would just mimic those voices and charge people money. So yeah, I mean, but if you ever go to a real shaking tent, that thing's going to defy the laws of physics. It's going to like move almost completely flat one side, almost completely flat one side. You know, it really is mind-boggling. Someday I wish I could take like Neil deGrasse Tyson and that one Japanese guy. What's his name? He's a famous scientist. But yeah, I wish I could take those guys to a shaking tent sometimes, just to blow their minds away. Sometimes too, you see that thing like the way it wiggles on top, you know, like ooh, like it goes real fast, and all of a sudden, and they'll just go real fast. And sometimes you can see like a pulse on the ground coming out, you know, like it just really like it shocks you on what you see. But growing up, to me, that was normal, you know, like to see that. And then, but yeah, I mean, so growing up as a young kid, I saw a lot of spirits my whole life. I've always seen spirits my whole life. And to me, it was normal to see those things. Like I wasn't scared of it when I was younger. And it wasn't until we moved to Maniwaki, Quebec. And then I learned from those kids over there, like how to be scared of those things. Because those kids grew up watching horror movies, you know, like, because, you know, nowadays, when people see ghosts, that's one of the things they teach you nowadays. Like today, that's a cultural norm. They teach you to be afraid of that stuff. You know, that's one of the things about nowadays. So I was never afraid of that stuff until I went to school in Maniwaki, Quebec. And then now, like even today, I'm still scared. So usually if I like nowadays when I see spirits, they appear as like little orbs, and they move like that. Or sometimes they look like stars. You know, like you'll see a little like bright glow. But yes, but not often do I see like a human figure. And but nowadays that's what I notice, what people look for. You know, they're always looking for a humanoid figure, and I think that comes from movies and TV. And then, but yeah, so yeah, my name's Memegwesi, and this, some of you don't know, it actually means those little people. And they actually have those people all over Earth. And so when I was a little boy, I actually saw one when I was a young boy. I was sleeping in my bed. I was laying sideways, like the edge of the bed was in front of my face. And then right there, I woke up and there was two little hands right in front of my face, like resting on the bed. And I could see his face, and he had a long, pointy hat. And slowly, it took my eyes had to adjust, and I was wondering, like, what the heck is that? But but yeah, I mean, that night. So growing up, my biological father and my mom split up, and my biological father, he had my older brothers and my older sister living with him. And that night, he came over to visit us. And on my bed, my older brothers were sleeping with me, and they were behind me, and I was at the front of the bed. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, and I saw that thing, and he was right in front of me. And that was one of my first times seeing one of those little people. And slowly, like, I saw his hands, and I remember his I could see like his fingernails were kind of pointy, and I saw his little fingers, were right there, like resting in front of my face, like on the edge of the bed. And I could see his face, and I could see his hat, and slowly my eyes adjusted to the dark. And it's like he knew when I could see his face. The moment I could make out his face, he smiled at me. And the moment he smiled at me, it scared the crap out of me. And I jumped in the back of the bed, and I squeezed between the wall and my brothers. And I remember laying there just scared, and I got real hot, and I was sweating just hard. When I was so scared, I didn't want to move. And I fell asleep, and I didn't get out there till the next morning. But yeah, growing up, I always saw little people throughout my whole life. Sometimes they have, like those little lawn gnome statues. Sometimes I saw them with those hats. Sometimes I didn't see them with those hats. Sometimes they look like a traditional native with like buckskin clothing and long hair. Sometimes that's what they look like. And sometimes they have beards. Sometimes they got those pointy hats. So it was always different how I saw them. And also too, one of the things I was told too is they can change their size. They can become small, like the size of my hand, or they become big, like 3 feet tall. Like I think that's like the biggest they can become. But yeah, those beings too, they can defy the laws of physics. There's stories of them riding in they have stone canoes, and then when their canoes, like there'll be a cliff, and their canoe will just go right in the cliff wall, and that's where they live. They live inside the earth. And then also too, growing up, they also taught Anishinaabe people how to ride your canoe fast, like as if you got a motor under. They taught them to sing a song. Then you sing that song and you hit your boat. And when you hit your boat, your canoe is going to go forward. You sing even more, but every time you hit your boat, your canoe is going to go faster. And depending on how many times you hit it, that's how fast your canoe is going to go. So yeah, there's many things I witnessed growing up that actually defy the laws of physics, and I have no explanation for how it works. That's why a lot of these things I wish I could like show some scientists, like, hey, you want to see what Anishinaabe people can do? And but yeah, I remember a story one time with my dad. He was telling me one time I think it was him and his older brother. They were on a river, and one time they were. So if you're trying to paddle up river, you go on the side of the river where the current's really slow. That's how you paddle up river. But they were having a hard time, and then out of nowhere, their canoe started going real fast. And my dad said there was a little person in the back. He sang that song, and he hit the boat, and he made the canoe go forward for them. So my father had one of those little people do that for him in his canoe, make it go forward. Those are little people, and there's another type of little people. Some people call them fairies because they have wings. But some people call them Memegwesi, and some people also call them Dunes. And my dad, Leonard Moose, that was one of his names, Dunes, and that was those fairies. And I heard them growing up as well. It sounds like a dragonfly. Like I heard him I woke up one night and I thought there was a bug in the house. I heard like a dragonfly flying around, and I kept looking around for it. So I turned on the light, and I saw it. It almost looked like a stick being, he almost looked like a stick person. But I remember he had 2 legs, 2 arms, and he had long wings on his back. And and then he flew out the window. And that was one of the first times I saw one of those small little fairy people. But yeah, those are called Munaduns, or some people call them Memegwesi as well. Let's see, what else could I talk about? Man, time goes by fast.
We have like 13 more minutes. So I guess if anybody has questions, they can type it in the chat. Or like, I know one time at language table you shared about, I think like what your mom taught you about why it's important to put your tobacco out when you go new places type of thing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so one of the things Anishinaabe people do is when they use like tobacco for safe things, or you're trying to prophesize the future to make their road good. Like when you go somewhere, you put down your tobacco, and then when you do that, you're telling the spirits that you yourself, you want to return back to that spot. So you talk, you say, I'm going to travel someplace far, like I'm going over where, just name the location that you're going, and tell them that you're going over there, and that you want to return back to that spot where you put your tobacco, like safe, healthy, how you are now, and with everybody who's going along with you. So yeah, so just just explain that, and then but yeah, this is why it's important to have a name, is because you're you know the word wa'ah, that's like your namesake. So you have physical wa'ahs who are human beings, and you got spiritual wa'ahs. Those are the ones that went out and got your name. And then usually when you put down tobacco, talk to those spiritual wa'ahs to help guide you. So when you go someplace, you're gonna make sure you come back to that spot where you put down tobacco, so that you're gonna return home. So yeah, so growing up, that's one thing. That's one of the things my mom explained to me. When you travel someplace, so you put down your tobacco, so you come back to that spot that you left from. But I'll talk real quick about like working with spirits. So yeah, the very first time I was ever told to do something from spirits was like around 2009 or 2008. Like, but yeah, that was back then when I used to drink as well. And it was funny because I was actually drinking and I was smoking, and the spirits told me to do something. And so one night I had a dream I had to make a drum for these kids. And I remember seeing the drum. It had like dark brown hide, and the outside was red. And then when I woke up, like I had this intense feeling like I know I had to make it, like without a doubt. And so I got up and I put down my tobacco, and I spoke. I explained my dream in detail, like everything that I saw and what happened and how it should be made. And I said, if this is real dream, I really got to do this. And I said, help me make this, and then out of nowhere, my brother Brad, he sings on these drums, but his bass drum, he like broke it, and then he let me have his cylinder, and then eventually somebody gave me this big horse hide, and then all of a sudden I had this horse hide, and all of a sudden I had everything to make that drum. And then there was a lady up in White Earth. She called me up. She asked me if I could make a drum for these kids at this winter camp that we were going to. And so yeah, we got to the winter camp, and all of a sudden I saw those kids that I was supposed to make a drum for, and those were the kids that I saw in my dream. And then after, like, when I saw the hide, it was kind of see-through. It was super light brown. But yeah, it wasn't until we soaked it and then we made the drum, and it turned really dark brown, and then it just looked exactly like how it was in my dream. But yeah, but over there, my older brother Joe, or Ogamawab, helped me, and my father Leonard Moose helped me. My mom helped me, so we all made that drum together for those kids. And that was one of the first times that the spirits ever told me to do something. So yeah, so every once in a while, like, you're just gonna. I mean, for me, this is how it goes. Like, I'll have a dream, and if they ever tell me to do something, I'll just have this feeling that you just know you have to do it, you know. And every time I have a dream like that, I always try to explain it as best I can what I dreamt. And I ask for my namesakes to help me, those Memegwesi one, to help me make sure that dream comes true. So like at the Minneapolis American Indian Center, I actually, back then I had a dream that I should go work there. And then I should go work there and teach the language. So yeah, so I had a dream that I should work there. So after I had that dream, I put down tobacco, and I said, I'm supposed to go work at the Indian Center, but I have no clue how to go work there, you know. And then me and my wife Mary, we went down to Potawatomi Casino. And then the last day when we were coming home, out of nowhere, I was told by one of the workers there if I can come sub for the if I can be a substitute teacher for the language table there. And so I said yes, and then we went straight to Minneapolis. And I went straight to the American Indian Center, and I substituted for that class. And then the following week, that teacher couldn't show up, so they asked me to sub again. And I ended up subbing for 4 weeks in a row. And one teacher quit their job, and then they hired me. So when I first started working there, I was only making $25 every language table. But I just stuck with it, you know. I kept working there. And then eventually, over time, the language program grew bigger and bigger. And then we started getting grants, and now I'm still working there, and now we have this full-fledged language. We have this full-fledged grant from the ANA. Now we got this big, massive grant, and now I'm in charge of the language department. So yeah, so I had a dream I should work there, and I stuck with it. And now here I am, still working at the Minneapolis American Indian Center. And now I teach online, and then each class I have like several hundred people who join my classes. So growing up, I was always scared that the language was going to die. You know, I was always terrified. Like every time I saw an elder died, like I was always like sad because like everything, all the things that I would hear them talk about, you know, like all the stories, all the things they witnessed growing up, and all of a sudden they were gone, and then you no longer heard that from that elder. And then like part of the language was gone with them. So growing up, I was really scared because I know that's one thing we're going to witness in their lives. We're going to see all of the fluent speakers pass away. And so yeah, like growing up, I always thought that the language was going to disappear from the people. But now that I'm teaching at the Minneapolis American Indian Center, and I'm like teaching pretty much 100 people, like or a couple hundred people every time. So now I'm no longer afraid that the language is going to die. And I know the language is going to keep going. And but yeah, there's also immersion schools out there like Wadukadading or Nigani who teach kids from a very young age, and those kids are growing up as fluent speakers. So it makes me really happy to see that. So nowadays, I'm no longer afraid that the language is going to die. I'm actually really confident the language is going to keep going on, and that's one thing I tell people when they take my classes, like why it's important to learn the grammatical rules, is because nowadays, the Anishinaabe people, that's one of the things that we know. Like before, back then, we were people of oral tradition. Everything was spoken. But nowadays, we actually know today's way of life. And today's way of life is the written tradition. And that's one of the things we're going to keep going into the future. We're going to keep that written tradition with us. And so that's why I tell the people in my class, remember, learn those grammatical rules, because in the future, there's going to be books published in the Ojibwe language, all kinds of texts published in the Ojibwe language. And that's one of the standards going to go by, the grammatical rules that we know nowadays, you know. So in the future, the Anishinaabe people are also going to be people of oral tradition, but we're also going to be people of that written tradition. So we're going to keep what we learned from today's way of life, and it's going to be mixed with the traditional way of life. Because if something happens now, you know, in the future, because like us guys know how to build houses, we know about electricity, we know about running water. So if this life were to go away, you know, us guys are going to build houses. We're going to build like wind power technology, make windmills connected to generators, produce electricity, you know. So everything we know about today's way of life, we're going to keep it with us forever. So yeah, so so nowadays I'm no longer afraid for like anything bad to happen. But if something bad ever does happen, I always tell myself that the Anishinaabe people were told to move west to where food that grows on water. And So my family, when we harvest wild rice, we harvest enough wild rice to last us like maybe 3 years, 4 years, and that's just us guys only. So if something ever happens with Tave's way of life, all we got to do is just stay by those lakes where the food grows on water, and that wild rice is going to keep us going forever. You know, if we harvest wild rice 1 year, it's going to keep us alive for a couple of years straight. So that's one thing I tell myself: if anything ever happens, just go live by those lakes where the food that grows on water. That's where we were told to go in the Seven Fighters. If any of you are familiar with the Seven Fighters, so a long time ago, the Anishinaabe people, we were on the Atlantic coast, and then we were told by seven spirits to move east to where food that grows on water, and this is where we are right now, where the food that grows on water. Well, here in Minnesota and now Wisconsin, but nowadays I hear people are planting wild rice in like lakes in Ontario and even Michigan. So yeah, so there's more lakes that have wild rice on them. So if anything ever does happen, I'm just gonna stay by a lake that has wild rice, and us guys are gonna survive. All right, there's somebody asked a question. Oh, naming ceremonies. Yeah, if you want to name, find an elder who knows how to work with spirits. So I'll explain one way my mom works with spirits. So like if somebody comes to her who's sick, they don't know what's wrong with them, but they're sick, and then they'll give my mom tobacco. And then, so my mom has spirit helpers. So if somebody's sick, they're gonna talk to those spirit helpers. She's gonna feast them. She's gonna give them tobacco, and she's gonna give them gifts. And then during that ceremony, she's gonna feast them, give them gifts and tobacco, and she's also gonna sing a song so they can dance. And then she's gonna explain what's wrong with that person. And then when that person goes home, those spirits are going to follow that person and watch that person to see how they live over the next couple of days, to understand what's going on. Like, why are they sick? What are they doing? What are they eating? How are they living? Like maybe they're too lazy and they're just sitting around, or maybe they live in a bad environment where there's something unhealthy making them sick. And then they're going to come back and then tell my mom what's wrong with that person. And after they tell my mom what's wrong with that person, they're going to go out into the woods and find the medicine to help that person to heal themselves. And then after, my mom will call them up, and then they'll come back and she'll tell them what's wrong with them, and to use this medicine to help doctor themselves up. So yeah, so that's one way how my mom works with spirits, to help people who are sick, or maybe there's it could be a physical sickness, a mental illness, or a spiritual sickness as well. So yeah, so sometimes it could be generational, like something like maybe your grandpa or grandma did something really bad, and now it's backfiring onto their kids. You know, like sometimes even that happens as well. Stuff like that can happen to people. And it's already 8 o'clock. I wish we had another hour. But yeah, but one thing I want to say too is if you're ever gonna go see an elder or go help them, make sure you go travel to their house, and don't call them up. Go see them in person. Like, cook them food, you know, give them gifts, like give them tobacco, like visit them for a while and sit and talk with them, you know. But don't just only do it that one time. Do it a whole bunch of times. Like, be their friend, you know, visit them a lot. So if you're gonna try to ask an elder for help, try go visit them in person, and make sure you give them a tobacco. So one of the reasons why they give them tobacco is because when you give tobacco to an elder, like what they're doing is everything that they're giving you, all that knowledge, is everything they learn in their life. So in a way, they're giving you life, and in exchange for that life, you're giving them that tobacco. So you're making an exchange, you know, some life for that tobacco. That's what you're doing. So this is one reason why I should always but I mean, but not just only give them tobacco, but give them other things. Give them like physical gifts. And if you give them a physical gift, try to make it yourself, because that's one thing spirits like. They like it when you put your hard work and energy into that thing that you made for them. I mean, if you can't, just go buy it from the store, you know. But if you can, try to make it with your own hands. Whenever you give an offering or a gift to an elder, even to the spirits as well, try to make it with your own hands. Man, that went by fast, didn't it?